Olivia Brown is my name. My younger sister, Mia, is 22 years old, and I am 28 years old. This is the narrative of our family's dissolution, but it's also the story of its resurrection. I'm sitting at my desk at work right now, staring at the computer screen in front of me with blank eyes. A history of bank transactions is shown on the screen. I can't believe the enormous withdrawal amount mentioned there as fact, no matter how many times I look at it. My hands are shaking, and my chest is churning with despair and rage. There's a family portrait on the desk. It included Mia, me, and my happy parents. The irony of that family portrait hurts now. This is not how I thought things would work out. Our family appeared to be a typical middle-class family. James, my father, was employed by a nearby construction business as a site supervisor. He gained the respect of his co-workers and was well-liked at work because of his fastidious nature and strong abilities. Charlotte, my mother, worked at an elementary school as an administrative staff member. She was well-liked in the neighborhood and involved in the PTA. We had our golden dog, Cooper, and lived in a reasonably priced suburban home. We took family picnics on the weekends and visited local tourist attractions when on vacation. You might find that type of family life any place. On weekends, my father enjoyed putting up the barbecue grill in the yard and throwing parties for the neighbors. Every time the scent of my mother's handmade apple pies permeated the house, it brought us joy. However, there were always hidden dynamics at work behind that everyday veneer. In hindsight, it may have begun when I started primary school. I assumed the position of the family's responsible oldest daughter from an early age. It was a job that came effortlessly to me because of who I am. I gained the respect of my teachers in elementary school by frequently taking charge of the class. I regularly maintained top exam scores and completed my assignments at the due day. I won district competitions while serving as the swimming club's captain and president of the student council in middle school. I began working weekends at a fast food restaurant at the age of 15 to supplement my income. I started by purchasing a lovely scarf for my mother's birthday as my first purchase with my income. But her response was surprising. She added, "Thank you, but you didn't have to push yourself to buy it." And I recall her tone being detached. Mia, meanwhile, became the family's idol as she grew older. She was gregarious, upbeat, and able to instantly make friends with everyone. Despite her mediocre academic performance, she had a bright personality that brought her many of friends, and her visits kept our house alive. She received what could be described as overprotective affection from our parents, who fulfilled almost all of her desires. The way we celebrated our birthdays was one really noteworthy distinction. Mia's birthday was usually celebrated with a large celebration to which many of her classmates were invited. Balloons were used to adorn the yard, and a mound of gifts accompanied a handcrafted cake. My birthdays, on the other hand, were frequently marked with the humble remark, "You're an adult now." I requested a bright red bicycle for my 12th birthday. Many of my classmates were riding bicycles to school at the time, and I wished I could be one of them. My parents, however, thought it was exorbitant. Rather, they gifted me study materials. My parents agreed to get Mia a comparable red bicycle right away when she requested one 3 years later. Because she's still young, she needs a safe way to get around, they said. My recall of the 16-year-old incident is still quite clear. I finally got enough money to purchase a new game system after more than 6 months of rigorous saving. I worked long hours to save money, prepared my own meals, and took on extra shifts on the weekends. The nonchalant response I received from my parents was, "Oh, we bought that for Mia last week, so you can share it with her." As though it were the most normal thing in the world, they stated it. Unaware of my emotions, 10-year-old Mia was ecstatic. Every time I wanted to use the new console, she would say, "I'm using it right now, so wait your turn. She had complete control over it. My savings were ultimately transferred to an education fund. Oddly enough, though, I didn't harbor any animosity toward my parents at the time. I thought those events, if anything, strengthened me. I learned the value of financial freedom and experienced the satisfaction of accomplishing goals on my own. I majored in finance in college after doing really well in high school. I obtained scholarships to pay for my education and moved out to live in a university dorm, juggling part-time jobs with my studies, even though my parents utilized some of my money to help with tuition. I worked on getting ready for the future. I taught kids on the weekends and worked part-time at the library when I was a college student. I worked and studied in a never-ending cycle, from early mornings to late evenings. My desire to become an expert in finance, however, never diminished. I often received top scores in my financial analysis seminars, and my teachers would congratulate me by saying, "You have a bright future ahead." Mia, who is currently in middle school, was doing well at home with our parents' full support, while I was living a hectic and difficult life at college. On weekends, Mia's pals would nearly always be in the living room when I got home. The smell of Mom's handmade brownies and cookies would permeate the house, and the happy laughter of middle school girls would reverberate throughout. One instance that stands out in particular is when Mia joined the school's theatrical club. At the school festival, she was chosen to play the major role in Snow White. Without delay, our parents made the decision to sign her up for a professional acting class and spent a lot of money on her outfit. While Mom tirelessly transported Mia to and from rehearsals every day and studied lines with her on the weekends, Dad took time off work to assist with the construction of the stage props. Mom was happy to drive Mia to the mall whenever she wanted to go with her friends, and she also gave her plenty of money to spend. New clothing and accessories gradually filled her room, transforming it into a sort of store. Even when Mia did poorly on tests, our parents were forgiving and said, "This isn't a big deal. We're so glad she's growing up to value her connections with others," our parents said proudly when Mia suggested a project to raise money for the student council, or instead took part in neighborhood cleanup efforts. Our parents immediately engaged a private tutor after Mia failed her midterm math exam and had a score below the passing threshold. They politely said, "You're busy with your own studies, aren't you?" when I volunteered to teach her myself. Eventually, a youngster from one of Dad's co-workers tutored Mia twice a week at our home. Our parents prepared a lavish celebration for her 13th birthday. Pink and white balloons were used to adorn the yard, and the focal point was a professionally prepared cake. In addition to a few pals she made at her cram school, her whole class was invited. Even in my opinion, the ostentatious goods on the present table, which included a desired designer handbag and the newest smartphone, were luxury products. During a break from working on my academic projects, I witnessed this spectacle while experiencing a range of emotions. I loved my sister dearly. However, the glaring difference in the way we were handled left me perplexed. Mia shone like a princess as she reveled in our parents' love. Even though I worked part-time at the library on the weekends, she seemed to take their dedication for granted and had a genuine grin. Mia enjoyed going shopping or watching movies with her pals. I was reminded of my own middle school years every time I saw Mia's social media posts. I was astounded that two sisters who were born to the same parents could have such dissimilar upbringings. I obtained a job at a big investment bank as an analyst after I graduated from college. I started living alone in a little flat at the age of 22 when I achieved complete financial independence. I frequently arrived for work before 7 a.m. and stayed until after 10 p.m., but the pay was worth it. My primary responsibilities were creating thorough reports for investment choices and performing financial analysis of startup businesses. My managers gave me excellent reviews, and I was given significant tasks to work on. By my third year, I was willingly attending training sessions and continuing my studies to obtain professional financial certificates, even on the weekends. Mia, meantime, started attending a nearby public university. Communications was her major. Mia's time at college appeared to be reminiscent of a coming-of-age tale. With the help of our parents, she traveled overseas during her summer breaks, partied with friends, and immersed herself in club activities. I tried to stay in touch with my family while I was creating my own life. Every month I went home, ate with my family, and heard Mia's tales of her time at college. Mom continued to contribute in the community, while Dad's love of gardening remained unwavering. Although our relationship appeared to be harmonious on the surface, there was a hint of discomfort. This relationship persisted for a number of years. I started to see a change in my parents' perspective toward my employment at that point. They had not previously expressed much interest in my work, but all of a sudden they began to make uninvited comments. I told them candidly about my accolades and promotions when they inquired about my job, but "You're working so much, but what about marriage?" was usually their answer. Mia was also having trouble finding a job at the moment. When Mia complained, Mom would always react with something positive, such, "You're such a hard worker," or "I'm sure you'll find the perfect job." In retrospect, I question whether my parents wanted to pull me down a notch after witnessing Mia's difficulties in her job hunt. Mia finally received her college degree last spring and was hired by an event planning firm. Since I was so proud of her, I chose to give her the newest laptop she had been eyeing as a graduation present. I wanted to give her a unique start to her new life, even if it cost the equivalent of 3 months' worth of my pay. My parents' response was surprising, even though Mia was overjoyed with the present. "You didn't need to purchase such a costly item. Are you attempting to impress your sister?" I felt really let down by what they said. What had been intended as a celebratory gesture had been misunderstood. My mother called me one day with excitement. On a nice spring afternoon, I was listening to her voice on the phone while strolling around the office district. "Olivia, I have wonderful news." There was enthusiasm in her voice. I inquired, "What happened?" She declared, "Mia is engaged." I was taken aback. Though I had heard nothing about marriage, I was aware that Mia was dating someone. I had heard that the man met Mia at their church and was employed at a nearby real estate firm. "And we've planned the perfect gift for her," Mom went on excitedly. "Wow, that sounds wonderful," I said nonchalantly. My parents doing something extra for Mia wasn't out of the ordinary. "Yes, we used your debit card to take $220,000 out of your account. It's to cover Mia's wedding costs." It seemed like my whole world stopped when I heard those words. The bustling street sounds and the warmth of the spring day vanished into the distance. What did you just say?" I was shocked to hear that. I could feel my knees starting to shake as I stood in the middle of the busy office district. Mom happily stated, "The money's already been spent," as if to share some excellent news. "We have already paid the venue's deposit and have discovered the ideal wedding gown." We made the decision immediately after the coordinator warned that this day would quickly fill up. I had run out of things to say. As if talking about the weather, Mom started to nonchalantly explain how she had spent all of my funds. She merrily carried on with her calculations, saying, "The dress was $6,000, the venue deposit was $5,000, and another $3,000 was for the reception decorations deposit. In the notepad in your desk drawer, I discovered your PIN. For emergencies. Isn't that what it stated? And Mia's wedding is an emergency?" Yes. I had jotted down my PIN for emergencies, but I had kept it out of sight in a drawer. It was not intended for this use, but rather for circumstances such as accidents or medical emergencies. I never thought my folks would discover it and utilize it against my will. Mom, this is illegal, I broke in a trembling voice. Using my money without even consulting me. It's a crime. Among the people rushing down the street, I came to a halt. I could feel my breath becoming shallow and my head spinning. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Mom remarked, chuckling lightly. I was much more hurt by that chuckle. Isn't our family our family? Marriage is a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. In addition, everything is already reserved. Wouldn't it cost considerably more to cancel now? I couldn't speak. My heart felt like it was being pierced by every word she said. This is a crime, I said, mustering what power remained. I'll see to it that every dime is given back. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. Money wasn't the only factor here. Years of unjust treatment and loss of trust were at issue. I had the impression that my basic existence was being rejected. I hung up and spent what seemed like hours crying in the office bathroom. Tears were streaming down my cheeks as I looked at my shambling reflection in the mirror. I had been saving for that $220,000 for 3 years. To accumulate that amount, I had put in many hours of labor, from early mornings to late evenings, taken on extra weekend shifts, and reduced my own spending. I had trouble sleeping that night. I rolled over in bed, mentally reliving the chat I had with Mom. I laid there feeling like my chest was being crushed. The family portrait on my apartment's wall caught my attention. Like a slideshow, memories of several birthday parties, vacations, and Christmas get-togethers came flooding back. Previously joyful experiences now have a sarcastic, sour tone. Dad called me the following morning before I went for work. My heart raced as my phone rang in the early morning, right before the sun rose. I still hadn't had my coffee. Your mother told me about you, Olivia. Dad spoke in a harsher tone than usual. I could hear the lawnmower's familiar buzz in the background. Dad never skipped his regular yard maintenance, even when he was upset. Why are you fussing so much? His remarks gave the impression that I was the one acting irrationally. Are you really expressing what Mom is saying? With a tone of incredulity, I inquired. I observed the bustle of folks making their way to work outside my window. This is illegal. It is against the law to use my money without my permission. Dad intervened, saying, "You're overreacting." He spoke in the same tone as when he reprimanded me as a kid. We are related. You ought to assist your sister more. Help? As a present for Mia's new employment, I already got her a laptop, but I made that decision. Taking my money without my consent is quite different. I was trembling as I spoke. In order to avoid being overheard, I did my best to keep my voice down as I spoke on a packed commuter train. When did you get so icy? There was a lot of disappointment in Dad's voice. My heart was struck by their words like a poisonous bite. You weren't always like this. This is not how the Olivia I knew would have behaved. Those comments caused something within of me to shatter. Emotions that had been repressed for years eventually erupted like a dam. I've always put forth a lot of effort working alone, Dad. You've given me everything, yet neither you nor Mom ever done anything for me. I had to force myself not to scream. Are those old stories really being brought up again? Dad was clearly irritated. The lawnmower's noise abruptly halted. You must quit evaluating yourself against your sister. I started crying uncontrollably when he hung up. I hurried to the bathroom to repair my destroyed makeup before I arrived at the office. The visage in the mirror that was looking back at me was completely worn out. My parents just didn't get how I felt, and it really got to me. I called the bank that afternoon. It became evident from looking over the transaction history that my parents had taken the money out using my PIN. Although the banker was empathetic, he clarified that it wasn't strictly considered unlawful access because the right PIN had been entered. I didn't give up, though. After giving it some thought, I made the decision to call the police that weekend. I passed a park on my way to the station where I used to go for walks with my parents when I was younger. Their home's living room still has a picture from that day. The disparity between those recollections and the current situation was nearly intolerable. The choice to report them was not taken hastily. I had remained up late the previous evening, sitting on the balcony of my apartment, thinking deeply as the sounds of the city faded away and the sky above was filled with stars. I faced my life and my decisions. Money wasn't the only factor here. It has to do with my own dignity. I had one more moment of uncertainty as I got closer to the police station. I came to a halt at the entry stairs. A cross at the top of the church across the street drew my attention. The cross looked like the one at the church I grew up going to with my parents. I paused for a second, but then I inhaled deeply and moved forward. I was greeted by a serene reception room with a uniformed officer who gave me a kind glance when I opened the hefty door. "How may I help you?" I was a little relieved to hear that. I responded, "I want to report my family's unauthorized money withdrawals." My voice faltered, but I was feeling more determined on the inside. I gave a young female officer inside the station a detailed explanation of the circumstances. She listened carefully, keeping a serious face as she took notes, but my hands trembled with anxiety. Every now and again she nodded and looked at me with compassion and understanding. She clarified, "Financial disputes like this aren't uncommon, but that's exactly why it's crucial to manage them with firmness. Family ties do not excuse criminal behavior." My parents were questioned by the police after they took the situation seriously. I pondered the future while sitting in a hard chair at the station as they completed the report. How would my parents respond? What would Mia think? What about their standing in the neighborhood? A wave of concerns swept over me one after the other. I got a call later that night to let me know that my parents' house had been visited by a police car. The streetlights were starting to flash on one by one as the sun sank outside my window. My parents were undoubtedly taken aback by the officer's arrival in their living room. My chest constricted at the prospect, but I told myself there was no going back. The police intervention sped up the course of events. After being questioned on suspicion of fraud, my parents' case was ultimately settled in civil court. My parents were ordered by the court to pay back the entire $220,000 that they had illegally taken out. They fought back ferociously. "That type of money is not available to us." They protested, "Repayment is impossible," as if I were a resentful daughter who didn't deserve pity. Just a few years away from retirement, Dad was firmly against taking on any more debt. Mom chastised me while crying, asking, "How could you betray your family like this?" But Mia's response caught me off guard. She stopped by my workplace as I was busy getting ready for her wedding. With tears in her eyes, she murmured, "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I am solely responsible for this." Mia expressed regret for her unintentional involvement and acknowledged that our parents' actions were inappropriate. Additionally, her fiancé acknowledged the situation and promised to gradually repay the money as a pair. Mia's genuineness touched me greatly. Even while I was still upset over the years of unjust treatment, my resentment was focused on our parents rather than Mia. "This isn't your fault, Mia. This concerns our parents," I informed her. By discussing our emotions and embracing, we were able to close the emotional distance that had developed between us over time. But my connection with my parents became irreparably damaged. Despite their pledge to pay in monthly installments, they did not fulfill their end of the bargain. Rather, they propagate rumors around friends and family, portraying themselves as victims and me as a callous daughter. I ultimately decided to sever my relationship with my parents. Although it wasn't an easy decision, I had to do it in order to save my life and well-being. On the day I returned to the house to get my things, Mom watched me silently from the second-story window. Dad totally disregarded me while he worked in the yard. Once a place of fond recollections, the mansion now seemed chilly and far away. 6 months have passed since then. I frequently see Mia on the weekends, and we have become like sisters. She has assisted in resolving miscommunications amongst our friends and family. They cut ties with my parents after discovering that they had embezzled my money without my consent and had not fulfilled their restitution pledge. I'm proceeding with enforcement-related legal actions right now. After approval, the proper steps will be done, such freezing their bank accounts. I've received a promotion and been given more responsibility at work. I've begun making new acquaintances and taking up photography as a pastime on my days off. I might never be able to mend my relationship with my parents. Nevertheless, I think I made the correct decision. I've finally realized that sometimes leaving family signifies the start of a new chapter in one's life. I still get a tinge of anguish whenever I go by the area close to where I grew up, but it's not the same as the deep rage or grief I used to experience. It has mellowed into a tender longing. Everybody is free to follow their own path, even if it means bidding farewell to someone they previously loved. My name is Kelly, and I'm 28 years old. I recently learned that my sister Claire received the automobile I purchased from my parents when she was a little child. Although I believed that my sister and I received different treatment, this episode has made the magnitude of that difference more evident than before. Although I was always aware that my sister received a lot of love and attention from my parents, I've come to feel that I haven't received enough of it, especially in light of recent noteworthy events. The inequity seems to be emphasized even more by the fact that my parents gave me no explanation. Although I've always felt uneasy, I never thought it would show out in such a pronounced way. Although my sister Claire is 3 years younger than I am, it was evident from an early age that our parents treated us differently. Our parents loved me before my sister was born. As a youngster, I sensed their affection, and any attempt I made was commended. But things took a significant turn when my sister was born, and I can still clearly recall it. Our parents appeared to find a unique meaning in my sister's existence, and I was also forced into a new position. Being dependable and providing for my sister was that duty. Even though I was still very young, this felt like a sudden duty. Even though I was still young enough to enjoy playing, I gradually began to feel less free to behave whatever I pleased, since I was supposed to be the nice elder sister. It was viewed as unsisterly, rather than merely a mistake whenever there was a family issue or I neglected my assignment. My sister, however, never appeared to experience such harshness. She frequently referred to my sister as irresistibly cute, since she resembled our lovely mother. My mother may have found it more difficult to love me since I looked a lot like my paternal grandpa, who had opposed my parents' marriage. My sister was frequently pampered when she behaved spoiled, and family discussions were always focused on her small victories and deeds. Every time I saw this, even as a child, I knew without fail that I had to work hard and be submissive in the family. When I worked hard in an extracurricular activity and received high grades, it was one of the most unforgettable experiences of my life. I was eager to see how my family would respond when I got home, but talks about my sister's acorn collection took over the conversation at dinner that night. In that environment, my need to be acknowledged and valued just vanished. These small incidents kept happening, which eventually made me reluctant to tell my family about my happiness and sadness. I thought that everything I shared would be less than what my sister had, therefore this emotion grew stronger. In contrast to me, my sister was never subjected to the weight of duty and was free to act as she pleased while our family looked on. I'm not sure how this affected her personality, but she was always a bright, self-assured child, exactly the reverse of how people perceived me. My sister occasionally appeared to be aware of the preferential treatment, and she did not respond when I questioned, "Why am I always the one getting scolded?" This sparked a recurring query in my early years. How can I be loved by my family? In hindsight, it's possible that our parents didn't intentionally give preference to my sister, but they had unrealistic expectations for me. But I was unable to comprehend this as a youngster, and I began to feel more and more alone in the family. Even as an adult, I still feel uncomfortable around my sister and our parents because of this inequity, which is ingrained in my heart. Every time I witness my sister get preferential treatment, I lose perspective. Our family was never affluent, and we had no money for needless luxury when we were growing up with the need to be loved and acknowledged. Everyday living was difficult, with little time for frivolous indulgences. Even buying basics frequently took careful planning. My sister always seemed to get what she wanted in spite of this. Whether it was fashionable products, new toys, or new outfits, I frequently witnessed my sister obtaining what she desired. This often evoked mixed emotions in me. I rarely had material desires. Instead, I was content with what I had and treasured what I had been given. However, my sister freely indulged her cravings and obtained items that I had not wanted. My parents always stressed the value of education and told me to study diligently for your future. Throughout my childhood, I heeded their warnings and gave my academics my whole attention. For me, the elementary school play was meant to be a memorable day. I prepared my outfit and learnt my lines attentively, even though I performed a tiny role as a villager after many rehearsals. I was anxious, but I wanted to do my part well. I said every line as I had practiced, accurately and clearly, on the day my scene started. But when I looked at the crowd, I was struck with a sense of surprise and isolation, since my parents were not there. My parents were there when my sister's moment came, beaming, watching her every step with delight, and the cameras were rolling. In order to get a better position and set up their camera for my sister's performance, my parents had, as it turned out, momentarily departed their seats. In the performance, my sister had the primary part of a princess, and they planned to meticulously record her moment on camera. It became evident during my performance that they had no care for me. On the walk home that day, I vividly recall feeling as if a hole had formed in my chest and being unable to speak to anyone. I just cried quietly to myself. I thought that my sister was the only object of my parents' devotion, and I wondered why we were treated so differently. New toys and clothes were always given to my sister, and I didn't know why, but it felt right to put up with and sacrifice things for her. I silently experienced days as a youngster when I felt like I didn't belong in my family. I have a strong feeling that I should forge my own course in life as a result of these events. This conviction now serves as a pillar of strength in my life. I was successful in landing a steady work in a technical sector when I graduated from college. I chose this job path because of my father's encouragement as well as my own efforts. My father always silently supported me, even though it looked like only my sister Claire got special care. He would even snap distant pictures of me at school functions. My father also covered the cost of my schooling. I felt a tightness in my heart when I remembered how my father, who is generally quiet and shy, had secretly saved money for me. I thus set out to progressively reciprocate my father's generosity as soon as I began working and generating a steady salary. I was initially struggling to make ends meet, but after careful saving, the moment had finally arrived for me to show my appreciation in a material way. My father had long expressed his desire to drive a Lexus, so I made the decision to give him one as a present. I recalled him bringing it up, which was unusual for him because he was a quiet man who rarely spoke his wishes in public. I still clearly recall giving my father the keys on the day of the delivery. A wide smile slowly spread across his startled face. For me as well, it turned into a memorable day. I was particularly moved by my father's attempt to contain his tears as he said, "I'm so happy to see how well you've grown up." Up until that point, I had worked hard for my family's benefit several times, but when my parents got the automobile, it was the first time I could joyfully thank them. Their happiness was publicly displayed when they said, "We never imagined such a day would come." I became aware of the value of expressing thanks after witnessing my father's sincere joy. Despite my initial perception that I didn't get as much love as my sister, I eventually came to understand that my father had always been encouraging me and thinking about my future. In addition to demonstrating my hard work, the Lexus was a meaningful way for me to return my father's love and sacrifice for me. I initially considered talking to my parents about the auto loan and splitting the burden, but after observing their emotional reaction, I made the decision to assume full responsibility and repay the 3-year debt on my own. Making this choice wasn't simple, but I thought it was the right way to express my appreciation. When she saw the new automobile, my sister grinned and said, "It's really cool." My sister, on the other hand, had completed high school, but had not enrolled in college or begun working. While I kept working hard and expressing my gratitude to our parents, I experienced conflicting emotions when I saw her rely on them and spend her time in a relaxed manner. It seemed a little reckless of my sister to act so carelessly. As a family, however, I reminded myself that acceptance was more crucial than expectation. I kept up my hard work and reduced wasteful spending to make sure I could pay back the auto loan. A year or so after I handed the automobile over to my parents, I took a day off and went to my favorite cafe. I recognized the Lexus as soon as I pulled into the parking lot. Maybe my parents like this cafe too, I thought, surprised, and grinned as I entered. But I didn't see my parents at all. Rather, I discovered my sister sitting by a window, contentedly conversing with a friend. "It's been a while," I reminded myself. "The Lexus was the reason our parents came." I said, "Did you borrow the car?" Startled, my sister glanced up at me and started talking awkwardly. My sister added, "I asked our parents to let me have the car." Her statements perplexed me, so I took a moment to comprehend the circumstances. Inside of me, a tornado of emotions churned. I never imagined that my sister would inherit the automobile I gave to our parents. "It's a nice car, and I wanted to show it off to my friends," my sister remarked with no malice. But I couldn't help but feel that my efforts and thanks were being dismissed, and I couldn't conceal my surprise. Naturally, my parents may have given the automobile to my sister in an effort to support her, but the amount of money I spent on that present left me feeling quite frustrated. I thought that we needed to have a serious family discussion about this incident, but I didn't have a long talk with my sister when I got home that day. I am now attempting to gently reevaluate my connection with my family and consider how I should communicate with my sister and our parents rather than becoming upset. I returned home the next weekend to speak with my folks in person. I felt compelled to immediately communicate the uneasiness and discontent I had been experiencing. Even though I was a little nervous, I made a determined effort to initiate the discussion. When we first started talking, it appeared that my parents did not comprehend the depth of my emotions. But as I continued, our individual viewpoints and situations became more apparent. "What made you give Claire the vehicle so casually?" I asked. "I gave it to you." "That's true," my father began to reply, but my mother cut him off. "What is the issue? We are allowed to use what we have been given any way we see fit," she stated. "I wish you had asked me first, but that's true." "Dad, I gave it for you," I answered. My mother made a strong case that they may utilize their present any way they pleased, which seemed quite callous in light of my inquiries and grievances. I also raised a question I had been considering. How did Claire cover the cost of her driving instruction? I can't believe she had the money because she isn't employed. With an uneasy expression, my mother replied, Claire asked us, and we paid for it. I suspected that would be the case, but you must have paid for it with the money I've been giving, don't you? What are you trying to dictate how we use the money you send? Was my mother's slightly irate response when she heard this. I give that money to assist sustain the home, but I'm not trying to dictate. It's totally not what I meant to use it for Claire's driving lessons, I remarked. Although my father attempted to settle our disagreement, Claire is also significant. After all, she is family, isn't she? As a special gift for Dad, I saved money to purchase a high-end vehicle. What makes you give it to Claire then? I inquired. My father can't speak anything in front of my mother and is often trapped between us. You shouldn't worry about such small details, my mother said. There is nothing wrong with what we're doing, and we handle our money carefully. My mother was saying things that I couldn't agree with. No, it's not like that. Sending money each month requires me to make compromises in my own life, so it feels so unjust that Claire, who is unemployed, receives it. She should work for the money if she wants a license. I was surprised to hear that the money I had been giving every month for home expenditures was used to pay for my sister's driving lessons. I had been sending money each month to cover living expenses for a long time without giving any thought to how it was being used. But it doesn't seem like the funds were being used in a way that I would support. I was really conflicted after knowing this, and my emotions abruptly altered at that same time. I gave it a lot of thought before deciding to quit making the remaining loan installments right away. Naturally, I also halted the living expense payments. I became aware of how unjust this circumstance was to me. My mother's statements made me feel under strain, as though voicing any displeasure would make her angry. Even if I did as she said, I knew I had to respect my own emotions. My father contacted me and gave me many apologies via email shortly after, but I chose to disregard them. It was discovered that the automobile had been transferred to my sister due to another startling incident, and naturally, she started receiving the car's invoices. Additionally, this had an effect that I had not anticipated. As soon as she got the bill, my sister called. "What on earth are you up to? You cannot just terminate the auto loan in that manner. Why should this bill be sent to me?" Slow down and allow me to explain. Yes, I have been making loan payments, but since you have taken possession of the vehicle, it is only fair that you do the same, I said. What? What are you discussing? You should just keep making the payments because you initiated them. When you say something out of the blue, what should I do? At first, I was paying for it for Mom and Dad, but now I had no reason to keep doing so. You should assume responsibility if you have taken the vehicle. Why should I assume accountability? I can't take over the payments all at once, and I don't have the funds. It was difficult for me as well. For the loan and remittances, I gave up my own life savings, although I haven't spoken public about it yet. You owe me nothing, and I shouldn't be responsible for repaying a loan for someone who is unemployed and always dependent on our parents. Don't make decisions only based on your preferences. Let's discuss when you've given it some thought. Aren't you supposed to cooperate as a family? I've already given Mom and Dad enough cooperation. Since it's urgent in my life, I won't back down this time. Take advantage of this chance to obtain employment and gain independence. Don't make fun of me. In any case, such a unilateral choice is unacceptable to me. I'll never be able to forgive you. After that, our parents sent me a lot of texts. They begged me to forgive my sister and keep making loan payments. They also expressed their wish that I would assist my sister in order to prevent her from facing difficulties in the future. I was unable to fulfill their wishes, though, because I had a lot of outstanding concerns. I knew I had to face my emotions while thinking about our parents. I have to think carefully about how I relate to my family because of this entire sequence of events. I began to feel that I had been exploited only for my sister's benefit, even though we were born to the same parents. I thanked our parents but adamantly reminded them that my sister should be able to support herself and take over the loan payments. I disabled their connections and stopped the remittances since I could no longer handle the weight and was overwhelmed by the complaints that had gathered. Although I felt I had performed my duties and responsibilities as a family member, I felt that this shouldn't go on at the expense of my own life and feelings. Instead of living up to their expectations, I have made the decision to go my own way from now on. I was certain that, as a family, I should put my personal happiness first in the future. I recently learned of our parents and my sister Claire's predicament from a cousin. In order to continue making loan payments, my sister began seeking for work. However, she failed to obtain a job because she had little work experience and had spent most of her time playing. Her first work ended abruptly because of issues, and she was dismissed nearly right away. Her inability to get along with coworkers and her tendency to generate trouble made it hard for her to maintain employment. My sister changed professions frequently because she lacked the tenacity and flexibility to adjust to new situations. Her inability to maintain employment caused stress and made looking for a job more challenging. My sister didn't appear to have a feeling of accountability for her job. She gave up easily because of our parents' unwavering support, her lack of will to earn the money she needed to live, and her inability to control herself. Her circumstances deteriorated to the point where she was unable to maintain employment. She eventually began taking out loans from her lover, who reportedly called the police when the sum increased, and she refused to pay back. Through a relative, our parents got in touch with me and asked me to cover her legal bills. However, I declined. I believe that the current state of affairs is a just reward for all of the time I have pampered her. After I stopped sending money, it was obvious that my parents and sister were having financial difficulties. My father has been pursuing divorce procedures since that incident, but my mother is against it since it would put further financial hardship on her. But my father's choice appears to be firm. I stuck to my decision and put my own life and future first. As a result, my sister and dad were forced to sell the automobile since they were unable to make the loan installments. They were eventually able to pay back a portion of the loan and somewhat lower their debt by selling the automobile. I genuinely believe that this is the outcome of my parents' long-standing pampering of my sister in an effort to control their living expenditures. I'm now free of my emotional baggage and able to concentrate on my own life, years after severing my familial links. My father continues to send me emails. His texts mostly contain musings on his incapacity to confront my mother, who preferred my sister, and an apology for violating my sentiments. He said he wanted to see his daughter and spend time together once again. After my mother's divorce mediation is over, I'm thinking of getting in touch with my father. Many people would believe that my father and mother share equal responsibility. But I'm not thinking of cutting off my relationship with my father, no matter what anyone thinks. Things are going nicely on the professional front. Last month, I was promoted to manager. I have everyday obstacles in this new role, but I also feel a great feeling of accomplishment. I genuinely appreciate this chance, and I frequently feel that my work reflects my development and accomplishments. My days are made more meaningful by my lucky coworkers and bosses who encourage me and let me be myself without unnecessary stress. I now have enough of time in my private life to engage in my interests and pastimes. On the weekends, I prefer cooking at home or taking trips with friends, which brings me peace and happiness. Family disputes used to be a hardship for me, but now that I'm free of them, I truly enjoy the happiness that comes with living on my own. I intend to keep being myself and valuing my own pleasure going ahead.